think it's time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cities on the Frontline. Today, we have a fun session on reclaiming the value of play in cities. We have 6 guest speakers who have agreed to do it all like a speed date. They're all going to speak very fast. I'm going to try to catch what they have to say. No, they will all speak on a very focused topic. My name is Francis Guesquière. I'm the practice manager for the Urban and Disaster Risk Management practice of the World Bank in East Asia. Lauren will present the speakers in a minute, but before we start, let me remind everyone of the intention of this speaker series and the ground rule for the conversation today. The purpose of these global webinars is to have open and honest learning conversation. The calls are not on the record, and we ask that you not attribute any comments unless you have the person's express permission to do so, and we will help you obtain this permission if required. We have more than 300 people registered for the call today, so we ask to facilitate the discussion that you pose your question in the Q&A function of the WebEx. Please note that the recording of the session, as well as the PowerPoint presentations, will be posted online next Monday. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Francis. Welcome, everyone. As always, it's great to be with you. I'm Lauren Sorkin, Executive Director of the Resilient Cities Network, and today we're bringing you a special edition of our Cities on the Frontline series, joined with our partners, the World Bank, as well as guest hosts from the Real Play Coalition. And we're very pleased that today's session will also feature the chair of our board, Mayor Sylvester Turner, to make a very special announcement about a new initiative we're launching here today, as well as feature the co-chair of Real Play Coalition, Jerome Frost, Global Cities Leader at Arup, will be providing some opening remarks on the value of play in city resilience. So what of city resilience and play? This pandemic has so obviously disrupted all aspects of our lives, as well as lives of children around the world. And from distance learning to social isolation, it really hasn't been safe for children to spend time in traditional play spaces. We are going to hear from experts this evening. There's really a paradigm shift needed in the way we think about urban health and resilience building. And we need an approach to urban design that embraces human and planet health resilience. We know, and we've heard from our cities through this crisis, that they're seeing in very real ways that it matters how we design cities for future generations. So we know a few key statistics. The majority of children today grow up in urban environments, a number that is increasing by the day. And an article in the Journal of Pediatrics of Cities tell us that children develop the ability to overcome challenges and adversity through play. And a very recent Harris Interactive poll with Lego Education in 2019 showed that 95% of teachers believe that hands-on learning is what really builds students' confidence. So we're going to hear more about this today, and we have 6 speakers who represent different perspectives on the value of play and who are committed to creating safer, healthy, and happy environments for children to become resilient. And so we're going to begin this session with some words from the chair of our board at Resilient Cities Network, Mayor of the City of Houston, Sylvester Turner.
Hello, I'm Mayor Sylvester Turner, joining you from the great city of Houston, Texas. As chair of the board of the Resilient Cities Network, I am thrilled to welcome you all here today to discuss the value of play in cities around the world. An incredibly important topic, and one that is near and dear to my heart. It is with great enthusiasm that I get to kick off this session by announcing a brand new partnership for us at the Resilient Cities Network with the Real Play Coalition focused on strengthening urban resilience through play. Resilient Cities is pleased to be at the table with partners from Arup, the Lego Foundation, IKEA, National Geographic, and UNICEF, all working together to advance investment in play in cities globally. Living through the COVID-19 pandemic taught us that our health and well-being can be directly linked to the physical and emotional environments in which we live. This is even more true for children. Play is essential for a child's health, physical and emotional growth and intellectual development. Play and physical activity helps children build their own resilience. The pandemic has had very serious impacts on children around the globe, disrupting schooling and activities, affecting their social connections, and even impacting nutrition. As we see with most crises, the impacts are even more pressing on those living in vulnerable communities with lacking access to clean air, clean water, or green spaces to play. However, there is hope. I am incredibly hopeful that this moment of change has awoken in leaders and communities around the world the desire to approach our challenges differently through a renewed lens aligned with the theme of building back better for all. In the United States, we are seeing leaders prioritize resilience, inclusivity, health, and sustainability in recovery plans and stimulus packages. It is imperative that we at the Resilient Cities Network now work as part of the Real Play Coalition to ensure that these investments strengthen the resilience of children in our communities who will lead the future of our shared world. In Houston, we are a pilot city in the UNICEF USA Child Friendly Cities Initiative, aiming to implement solutions that ensure that every child is respected, valued, treated fairly, and loved. As chair of the Resilient Cities Network Board, it gives me great pleasure to share with you today that we are launching a survey on play for city authorities and urban practitioners. We request that all of you and your wider networks contribute to our efforts to measure the scale of this challenge around play in cities. The data collected will be used to develop a greater understanding of the barriers to play in cities across the world, as well as opportunities to take action that leads to change. It is with great pleasure that I can kick off today's sessions of Cities on the Front Line on reclaiming the value of play in cities, and I look forward to the learning and growth that comes from this session.
You've just heard from the chairman of our board, Mayor Sylvester Turner, and he has officially launched our partnership with Real Play Coalition here today. Now, at Resilient Cities Network, we are a city-led network, and so I'm very pleased to announce that we will be working with a group of ambassador cities over the next several months to advance the agenda of play and building urban resilience. The cities of Belfast, Colima, Houston, Montreal, Milan, Ramallah, and Tbilisi have all committed to join us, and Barcelona and Bogota are shortly behind. As part of our announcement, we're officially launching the survey that the mayor talked about and inviting all of you to participate and provide thoughts on how to accelerate play-focused investments. We call for each of you on the webinar this evening to complete the survey and to share the links with your colleagues, partners, and your wider networks. By doing so, we'll together be able to better understand how cities are prioritizing play and what can be done to help advance action on this agenda. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Jerome Frost, Global Cities Leader at Arup and Co-Chair of the Real Play Coalition. Mr. Frost is the leader of Arup's global planning business and leads the firm's sustainable development efforts. As the former head of design and regeneration for the Olympic Delivery Authority for London 2012, he was awarded an Order of the British Empire in recognition of his services. And as a town planner, he holds degrees in planning, land economics, and urban generation. Jerome, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks very much, Lauren. I'm never sure of the relevance of the British Empire these days, but it's very nice for you to have quoted that. And let me say, I'm so pleased to be joining you today with the Resilient Cities Network, an organisation that we know and love to work with and have done so on many occasions, and the World Bank, equally another partner that we regularly work with, is Arup. So I thought I would just give you a little bit of an insight into the Real Play Coalition and some of the work we've been doing to set the scene a little bit for further discussion later on in this event. So just to reiterate, the Real Play Coalition is a global partnership that brings together IKEA, Lego, National Geographic with Disney Plus, UNICEF and Arup. We came together, very different kinds of businesses, a very different kind of focus to each of our work. We came together around a kind of common purpose, and that common purpose is the ambition to reclaim children's right to play in cities. We see play as essential to a child's well-being and a child's development. But the focus on play goes so much further than that. It really breeds social cohesion, integration in communities, and indeed, I think, has very strong economic benefits that flow from it. But there has been a growing deficit in the provision of play space and spaces within cities which are playful and places that children can really seek that development opportunity and seek out the opportunity to enjoy space without fear of harm. The Real Play Coalition, therefore, is a kind of focal point, if you like, for pulling together knowledge and sharing knowledge and expertise and resource to help cities across the globe really understand what kind of opportunity there is, how to engage in the play discussion with communities, and then how to come forward perhaps with solutions and opportunities to really try to address that deficit. Arup plays its role in the coalition by being focused very much on the built environment and on cities. We are very, very focused on creating safe, inclusive public realm and creating playful environments in cities, which go to the heart of this agenda. I think broadly we see play as a kind of Trojan horse. Whilst the focus is on the benefit to children, actually we know that by investing in safe spaces, in those spaces that children like to play, and we're also investing in places that their parents like to occupy, that the elderly generation like to occupy, and places that bring together different aspects of community. And indeed, we've worked with many that have demonstrated that by investing in those places, real value is realized in real estate that is associated with those places, and at a city scale, they attract the kind of global talent to those to cities where those kinds of places exist, and that kind of community feel really comes to the fore. So Arup is working currently in the coalition with cities and practitioners, embedding play principles in urban design, in policy formation, and in decision making. We've done this through a number of different initiatives, through the Reclaiming Play in Cities initiative as a good example, with London, Milan and Cape Town, working across those cities to form an urban play framework, which is really a guide for urban design practitioners as to what the design of good place, good space means if it's going to accommodate that kind of playful philosophy. In London, more recently, we did a very focused piece of work with the London Borough of Barnet and with the Royal Town Planning Institute, which works globally, to create a play profile of that borough, setting out a kind of methodology that can be adopted by others across the globe, along with solutions, which really seeks to identify where problems exist, what the challenges might be for communities in creating play space in this kind of dense urban environment, and then coming up with opportunities to solve those problems through a menu of different solutions. And more recently, we've teamed up with ChangeX, which is a community-focused organization, bringing together different community groups to help them understand at a very much a grassroots level, how they can start to think about how play can be introduced into neighborhoods and into communities, the kind of very thing that has come to the fore for so much of us during this pandemic period, the importance of neighborhood. This pandemic has highlighted to us the impact, the extent of impact on children and communities, and the value of space, outdoor space and even indoor space. We often value more what we can't have, and the opportunity to meet indoors has really come to the fore. So we've taken that opportunity to study that impact, and we undertook a survey in London, Paris, Berlin, Milan, Madrid, really to understand what kind of impact they're seeing. And some issues really came to the fore there. The importance of seeing the city in smaller modules, in neighborhoods, rather than seeing it as CBDs or larger. The importance of essential services being clustered around community hubs. the polycentric nature of those hubs, the importance of nature and access to green space, and actually with that, the kind of experiential qualities of some of those spaces, the importance of noise versus silence in an urban environment for local communities, and the importance of parks and spaces in recognition that they are places that bring together communities and where inclusion really comes to the fore and communities feel safe and belong. And the importance then of the concept of community ownership of those spaces, the degree to which communities seek to look after those spaces and indeed create new ones. And then finally, through our work, I think we're really beginning now to bring together some real evidence of the economic benefits of investing in play that go far beyond the direct consequence and improvement of children's development to some of those aspects that I mentioned before. The opportunity for investors to see that through investment in space and good playful spaces in cities, you're also attracting talent. You're attracting the very people that you want to employ into your spaces. And you're attracting those people and encouraging them to be retained, to stay, to want to stay, and to continue to develop and build more of that kind of environment in our cities. So important as we think about how we attract people back into the offices and our CBDs of our cities. So on that note, I'm going to hand back to you, Lauren, and hear from other speakers. But I hope I've given you enough flavour of the work that we do. I'm sure many of those topics will come up in what we hear for the rest of this event.
Thank you, Jerome. And I love that idea of using play as a way to deliver other kinds of benefits in the community. It's kind of like when someone does the airplane fork with a kid who needs to eat their broccoli. Anyway, I'm sure we'll come back to many of the topics you mentioned. For now, I'm going to introduce Tiago Eric de Sá, who is the Healthy Urban Environment Technical Officer in Environment, Climate Change, and Health at the World Health Organization. And he leads the WHO's work on healthy urban planning and also serves as the responsible officer for the publication of Integrating Health in Urban and Territorial Planning. And this is jointly published with UN Habitat and was just launched last May. And so he occupies this intellectual nexus in climate, health, urban planning, and children. And so I'm so glad to have you with us today, Tiago, and I'm going to turn the screen and the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a great pleasure to be here, and hello, everyone. It's very nice to be part of this conversation, and I would like just to start by congratulating you all for the excellent and much needed Real Play Coalition. Having my background in sports science and working closely with children even long before joining WHO and shifting to broader urban environmental health issues, you can only imagine how important today's subject is to me. Well, if you think about the urban environment as a living body, play, for me, should be considered its pulse. And as we all know, a living body with no pulse most likely is no longer alive. Play is an evidence sign, a biomarker, if you will, of the health of the environments and societies. Therefore, reclaiming the value of play and creating enabling environments for children, for adolescents, but also for adults to play is a key entry point to integrate health into urban policies and interventions. In that sense, as part of our activities under the Healthy Urban Planning umbrella at WHO, I'm really happy to share with you the news that we, together with UN Habitat and UNICEF, joined forces and are now developing guidance on public spaces for children, including, of course, aspects that are quite relevant to play. We also continue to work to fill the knowledge gap when it comes to the evidence on the health and health equity impacts of enabling environments to play, as well as on the interventions that work and why they are successful. We know that there is a knowledge gap when it comes to the evidence around kids, and that is very much true for play as well. But we also know, and I'm sure that everyone attending this webinar is familiar with the fact that guidance and evidence per se is not enough. We also need to advance on ways to ensure that all the guidance produced reaches national governments, local authorities, financing bodies, the communities, with the right messaging, with the right governance mechanisms, and with the technical support that is needed for effective change, ensuring, and I think that this is really important here, that children are not only the beneficiaries of these changes, but they're also active participants throughout the process of planning, implementing, and monitoring those interventions. And this is also health enhancing, because enhancing the agency of children is a critical aspect for them to progress healthily throughout their lives. We at WHO truly believe that the health community has a very important role to play, bringing its expertise, knowledge, convening power, the capillarity, and the credible voice in order to create demand for pleasant, clean, safe spaces for play in cities. In that sense, we've been working relentlessly on an implementation framework with many partners as part of WHO's Urban Health Initiative to address precisely this gap on how to bring the health community to these discussions, which goes beyond healthcare. And we are very happy with the successful results produced, strengthening the leadership of local stakeholders and communities. I'll be happy to share more details on the Urban Health Initiative outside this meeting for those interested. We also see that reclaiming the intangible as well as the tangible value of play in cities, including the health and economic value that Jerome just mentioned in his intervention, can help us to deliver not only health and well-being for all, but can also serve as a starting point for us to address many of the relevant agendas of today's world, from the immediate health agendas, such as the COVID pandemics, the crisis we face with non-communicable diseases, which has been hitting really hard the children more than ever, and of course the mental health crisis, which has deepened by the situation we face with COVID, for children especially. We also feel that play can serve as an entry point for us to address other relevant global trends, such as environmental degradation and the fact that we are reaching many of the boundaries of this planet, not to mention one of the major agendas of today's world, which is climate change. And for that, we would certainly require an integrated systemic approach, because cities cannot afford to tackle these problems one by one. Usually they are under-resourced and they are under pressure to deliver on many of those aspects simultaneously. Now, this understanding is explicit in many WHO documents, including WHO's Manifesto for a Healthy Recovery from COVID-19. I would like to end up by saying that reclaiming the value of play is a way for us to reflect which priorities we, as a society, as citizens, should give to our lives. It's also a way for us to envision this collective environment we would like to live in. And it's certainly a way for us to act together towards environments that are healthier for this, but also for the future generations to come. Play is health, there's no doubt. And I would like to invite us all to play together. Once again, many thanks for the opportunity to be in this event, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Tiago. I think this idea that play is health is one that we're going to come back to. It's now my pleasure to turn the panel over to Leticia Lozano, who is the co-founder and director of Masia Studio. And Leticia is an architect and experienced designer and play researcher who is passionate about public space and human behavior. Her studio is based in Mexico City, and that is where she is specializing in creating places, programs, and policies to provoke the construction of playful communities. So we are so excited to have her as a collaborator in this conversation. And Leticia, I am turning the microphone and the screen over to you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I will start to share my screen. Please let me know if you see it. So I am very happy to be here today. As Lauren said, my name is Leticia Lozano, the co-founder and director of Masia Studio, an applied research studio based in Mexico City. And I do have a background in architecture and narrative environments, and I am passionate about social and spatial justice and public policy. Back in 2019, after a change of government, both at the local and federal level, my business partner, Mariana Rios, and I decided to join forces and open Masia Studio. She had been working with psychologists understanding the role of play in children's processes of overcoming situations of extreme violence, and I had been working for 4 years as a civil servant as head of the Playful City strategy at the first innovation lab in Latin America. We had already witnessed the power of play and understood that by transforming cities from a child-friendly perspective, we are creating cities that are equitable, just, inclusive, safe, sustainable, democratic, and especially for everyone. So with the urban childhoods and play agenda at the core of the studio, we design and implement participatory processes with different communities to transform underused spaces into places of gathering, interaction, and play. We create trainings and citywide strategies to integrate play in urban agendas. And we design and disseminate tools and manuals to about the importance of play, how to design play spaces and evaluate its impact, how to continue playing during lockdown, but above all, how to decolonize knowledge and create content and data that speaks about the Mexican and Latin American context and in our own language. I wanted to share with you a project that we developed intermittently last year. And Tarango is a canyon on the outskirts of Mexico City. And like many other parts of the city, it has informal settlements. That land, the purple one, was supposed to be a conservation area, but around more or less 30 years ago, a clever borough mayor sold the land very cheap and families bought it. Services like water and electricity only run in formal neighborhoods, so from that red line up. Therefore, the families have had to create their own connections to access to basic services. Now, the rubbish collection system also delivers service only to the formal neighborhoods, meaning it runs on that line. But since this is a canyon, the houses under the line are on very, very steep streets. So for over 30 years, it was easier to throw the rubbish, including furniture and cars, over their back fences than walking up the ladder. This is how the canyon was when we first were invited to the project, to join the project. But for this to happen, an NGO had been cleaning the canyon for 2 years only with volunteers. They said the rubbish covered up to that red line that we're seeing on the screen, and the children who participated in the cleaning process were so surprised that there was a tree under all of that rubbish. Just to keep you especially aware, we were only working with this little arm of the canyon. The NGO has their heart set on cleaning all the arms and eventually the river. So to transform a space that was once regarded as a dumpster, you have to work with the community, integrate all of the voices and manage their expectations, because this was something that had to be done with no budget, only with volunteers and a few donations of material. Respectful to the environment and the rules, because of course, once with the design process started, then the government showed up, even if they hadn't showed her faces for over 30 years, and started to tell us that we should follow rules and regulations so we didn't pollute the canyon. We ended up designing a nature trail with 7 interaction spots to embrace compassion, contemplation, closeness while being physically apart, and of course play. Eventually, we had to narrow it down to making 3 a reality: a sandpit-like space to interact between generations, a contemplation space to observe the layers of history in the canyon, and a play space for all generations. So after 2 years, a space that was completely covered with rubbish became free, transformed by a community that took advantage of the skills from the 2 adjacent neighborhoods where most men work in construction. But it was by involving children, women, and elderly in the process of creating a place to belong that a sense of pride and appropriation was quickly developed, and play and curiosity started to appear in every day and in everyone. Therefore, if we as cities, decision makers, and neighbors want to build back better, we shouldn't miss out on the opportunity to put children and play at the heart of our communities. It has been proven once and again that when places are designed, developed, and transformed from that perspective, then the places belong to everyone. That would be all from me. Gracias. And those are our contact details in case anyone wants to say hola.
Muchísimas gracias, Leticia. I don't think, in all the times we've done this series, I don't think I've ever gotten emotional, but watching that canyon transform from a garbage heap into a place where the community was all together, for me was really, really beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to the discussion. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions coming for you as well. I now want to turn the floor over to very good colleagues and friends from the city of Belfast. Richard McLaren is here. He's the Resilience Program Coordinator and Project Coordinator for the Climate Unit in the city of Belfast. And Belfast is, as you heard me say earlier, one of our ambassador cities that will be helping to lift this agenda on the role of play in building urban resilience up. And Richard's responsible in the city for the implementation of the Belfast Resilience Strategy, and he manages the Belfast 1 Million Trees program and leads on adaptation as well within the climate unit. He'll be introducing us to his colleague, Kelly Persick, to discuss how the city of Belfast is addressing urban play spaces. So Richard and Kelly, over to you.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren. And hello, everybody from Belfast. I'm going to share my screen, so hopefully you'll be able to see. Okay. And that should be full screen now, hopefully, for everybody. So as Lauren says, we're here from Belfast. We've been a member of the Resilient Cities Network for a number of years. We're very proud and we're very privileged to be part of the network, and we've made some great friends and allies through the work. We're going to talk about play in Belfast today. I just wanted to start by setting the scene slightly. So for some of you who maybe don't know Belfast, we are an evolving city. We have been through a sectarian conflict, which many of you will be aware of. So I thought it'd be useful just to sort of like illustrate some of the interest and context that young people in Belfast have experienced and lived in. You'll see an image on the top left-hand side, which is an image of what Belfast City Centre used to look like in the 1980s. We had the entire city centre was cordoned off due to the threats to businesses and retail in the city centre. So you can see that people were not allowed to move freely through the city. As we've evolved, in 1994, there were ceasefires. In 1998, the peace agreement in Northern Ireland. But today, children and young people live very much with the legacy of conflict. So you'll see in the top right-hand image, there's a peace wall, which is one of a number within Belfast. There are hundreds of these structures throughout the city, and they are designed to separate communities who had been violently involved in violent conflict with each other. So, and those structures still exist today, and those are the type of things that people see on their doorsteps in some of our communities, not throughout the whole city. And also on the bottom, the image on the bottom left, which is very much something that people still see on the streets today, you know, images of armed groups who were very active in the past and are still present in some of our communities today. So it's just interesting, I think, to think about the context that young people are growing up in. We live in a peaceful society now, but these things are still exist and are still part of the challenges that people face day to day. Belfast City Centre has really changed and evolved. As the peace process developed, we moved into much more retail focused. So we tried to attract businesses into the city centre. We tried to bring people in to shop and make the city centre an economic success. I think, unfortunately, we lost sight slightly of the city centre and the city as a place for people. And I think that's where there's a great opportunity now, and through the work that we're doing through Play, to really bring the focus back onto the city centre and the city as a place for people, where we can embed play in the city. And I just want to introduce you now to my colleague Kelly Parsick, who works in the city regeneration and development part of Belfast City Council, and she's going to talk about some of the work that they've been involved in.
Great, thank you, Richard. So yes, so we have an alliance of resilience and regeneration, and this really came together as a result of a catastrophic fire in the heart of Belfast City Centre a few years ago that severed the city through its main corridor. So what I was asked to do was bring forward a family-friendly space. And it was a very high-risk project, a huge sense of urgency around it because the city had been severed, footfall was down, and people were just not coming back into the city because of this. So what we did is, on a very live site that was quickly pedestrianized, we put in a children's pop-up park, and that became a destination. And it also gave an opportunity for the people of Belfast to see the city in a different way. Belfast could be different, and this was an image of that. And it was temporary. And when it was removed, there was huge outcry. There was a public petition. And it was actually that moment of possibility that was presented to us to say, well, let's do more. Let's actually think about Belfast in a different way. And that is the springboard for our next step together, Richard. Go ahead.
As Kelly says, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well.
Fine. As Kelly says, that was a springboard for some of the work that we embarked on. The timing was perfect because we were in the process of developing the Belfast Resilience Strategy, which again was being done in partnership with Resilient Cities Network. The commissioner for resilience at that time, who's no longer with us, she's working on a different job. She's called Grania Long. She really had an ambition to put children and young people at the heart of the resilience strategy and really embed them in the city's design and development. So we used the tool of the resilience strategy really to achieve that aim. So the participation of children and young people in the city is one of three key pillars in that document, along with climate and connected infrastructure in the city. So what we've said is that the children and young people must be involved in the design of the city, must be part of that process of co-design. We've said, and we're actually doing a lot of work, really working with young people in terms of the climate ambitions in the city. One of the key pieces of work then that we undertook was in partnership with Arup, and was the development of the Urban Childhood Framework. And what we'd asked for originally was a toolkit which allowed us to look at spaces and places in the city, analyse them with the aim of creating better places for young people and looking for more opportunities for play. As with many of these projects, the process of actually developing that piece of work was nearly as interesting as the final product. So we engaged with young people and communities around the city and talked to them about their perceptions of Belfast City Centre. We found that they're really they feel disengaged from the city centre. They feel it isn't a place for them. They're really hungry to be involved, really interested in how they can be involved in the design of a place. They live in the neighbourhoods around the city centre, so they really want to get in there and get involved. And I found that there was a real enthusiasm and a real appetite to get involved in these discussions. So it was really an inspiring process. And the tool that we ended up with is a really helpful placemaking tool. And I would really endorse it, in terms of other cities, really have a look at that and use it if possible. And it's allowed us to drive forward this ambition of embedding young people their voice and their role within our work within Belfast City Council and also with other city partners. And I think Callie's going to pick up that point in relation to the next slide.
That's right. So we just keep building on our opportunities. And so this is one of them. So I have been leading a bolder vision for Belfast, which is the new vision for the city centre to create an attractive and accessible, safe and vibrant city centre. And within that vision, we identified future possibilities for the city centre and reframed these as questions, as what if. And one of these is, what if the city centre was a place for everyone to play? And so building on that, and after the removal of the pop-up park, Belfast City Council had to do something fast in the city centre. So we went to a piece of our own land in the city centre that was marginal and unloved and antisocial in many ways. And we refreshed this space, but we did this through engaging children and young people. And we took them to the site, we engaged with the design team, and we took on their ideas of what they would like to see in the city centre. Now, the design itself are these brightly colored images that you can see reflects the initial pop-up park type of design, but there sends a clear invitation. You are welcome in this space. And this is linked to our strategic direction as a city. We want to grow our population. We want city centre living. We want a diverse city centre. We want to move away from retail-led development. And ultimately, we want transformation as a city. Belfast is a city that is changing. And so there's two more things that we're doing here. Through this work that Richard and I are doing together, we're using the city as a lab. And what we want to do is we want to test and learn and build support and demonstrate the value for and the importance of play for health and well-being and for an inclusive city. And as you could see for Belfast, having that inclusive city centre is of critical importance for us. And finally, this is our opportunity to move past strategies and into tangible benefits. So we keep challenging ourselves. We're asking questions. Who is the city for? How do we create a people-focused city centre? How do we bring children and young people into this discussion? What is their role? How do we give them agency, as we already heard of today? So we're at the beginning, I feel. We are testing and we are learning, but we're delighted to be a part of this network because we want to hear from our peers and our colleagues across the world, and excited to be, I feel, on a journey together here. So thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Leticia. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jerome, Tiago, and Callie. This was wow, this was serious, quite powerful presentation. I must say, it'll be hard to summarize. I'm really impressed by how sophisticated, and when I say how serious the argument is, and I mean serious by sophisticated. I think, Jerome, you really put your finger on the fact that the power of play really helps us touch on so many important dimensions in our cities. I like your image of the Trojan horse to address the multiple dimension of cities. And maybe we can come back to that. And Tiago, I mean, I think WHO has been a pioneering, really underscoring the importance of health in cities, but not just health as healthcare, but health as really societal health, as a multiple dimension, including mental health, but also simply the health of the economy, depending on having a healthy population, which is, I think, an additional dimension. Leticia, I mean, I don't need to say, but this was very inspiring. I can tell you there are a lot of comments in the Q&A section and in the chat section asking for you to post more information about what you've done and about your experience. And I'm going to come back. I have a specific question to you after that experience. And Richard and I'm sorry, Callie, clearly Belfast is one of these cities that lives in the shadow of conflict, and where really the hope is that we can start with a new generation, and if we can do this, if we can build a new society that's inclusive, and have the city as a place where everyone can play, as you say, Kali, through children, then we have a fighting chance. I really like this idea of the, playground as almost as a catalyst for inclusion, to go beyond past conflict. But let me get to, we have a few minutes for questions. So let me get to maybe you, Jerome, and then maybe Kali or Richard. First, I mean, in all these efforts, clearly you mobilize the community, people want to participate in this. Jerome, you talked about how these kind of intervention is not just help mobilize communities and help people feel better in their environment, but it actually has positive impact on real estate value. Do you know, have you been able to work with real estate developers? Have you been able, do you know examples where these have actually participated in this kind of intervention? And Richard and Kali, in Belfast, are you guys able to bring some of the, those people on board? I think it's getting mayors on board can be difficult, but I think Playground can buy votes and it's always useful, but real estate developers look at the bottom line. You guys have any example? Maybe we start with you, Jerome, and then Kali and Richard. And then I have an additional question for Leticia, but I'll get to it later.
Thanks very much, Francis. I mean, I probably have two good examples, actually, where there's a kind of direct correlation, I think, to the investment in play and in that kind of wider investment in space, where it's led to real estate value being created. The first is my own experience, actually, on the Olympics in London, where as a public body, we were in the middle of doing a deal with a private developer to provide the housing for the Olympic Games, and it fell through because of the 2008 financial crisis. So as a public body, we had to take on the full cost of all of that, and there was this real sense that this was going to be a big sink for public money. And at that moment, we had to make some decisions about how we were going to create value to reclaim the kind of the cost that we were sinking in there, from the public purse. And we invested heavily, and it was a little bit of a, let's hope and see. But we invested heavily in the open spaces, the playgrounds, the spaces around the housing plots, etc., to try and turn what was at that point a place that people really didn't associate with a place that they wanted to live into a place that they did, by attracting them to the spaces before the housing, if you like. And it repaid hugely. When we came to sell the housing at the end of the Olympic process, we made really decent profits, but far greater than anyone had ever realized or had anticipated at the time, and it helped us repay a huge amount of the cost that had been sunk. But the other example came out of the work that was mentioned with regard to Belfast, but Arup did this quite extensive bit of research where we interviewed a number of developers, predominantly in the UK, about the value of play and the value of that kind of shared space. And the one that really stands out for me is Argent, who developed the King's Cross area of central London and have another development in Birmingham in London, in the UK. And in both cases, they start, before they build any buildings, they start by creating the play space. And by doing so, they attract children, they attract their parents, they attract the grandparents, etc., into spaces that they've never visited before. And they create this new place in the city that people and change people's opinion of that place. And in doing so, have created in London the most valuable real estate now in the capital. And that's outside the central business district, the traditional central business district. So real direct evidence. And if you talk to the development team there, they will always go back to that starting place, which created that value chain all the way through. So some real direct evidence. The point I would really like to draw your attention to, which I made in my speech, is I think we need to go to the next level now as we think about reoccupation of buildings, and particularly offices in central parts of our cities. People are not going to be convinced necessarily, having worked at home for the last year, that the office is what's going to bring them back, because they can work from home, they can do the same kind of stuff. What will bring them back is what happens around the office. the exciting spaces around the office and the way you can bring your family into that kind of working world. And I think that is going to be the next big step we need to really convince people of and attract investment into. And I see the private sector playing a huge role in partnership with the public sector doing that.
Indeed, thank you. And actually, Jerome, as you were talking, I was thinking my last trip before the pandemic was to Christchurch. And Christchurch is an amazing example where they built a massive playground in the center of the city, which is really a destination for everybody during the week, on the weekend, and even tourists. And it's really recreated some life in the center of the city that was quite traumatized by multiple earthquake. Over to you, Kali. I see you're nodding. I'm sure you have a lot of.
I am. So many
this.
things you said, Jerome, resonated with me. And I was thinking about, we talk about in Belfast more and more about social value and how to bring the development community and developers into the conversation of placemaking. And as we build an evidence base for the value of play that has economic benefit, of course it does. And sometimes I feel I don't want to be reduced to the economic benefit, because what I think Richard and I just quickly illustrated was that there's a wider social benefit and connectivity benefit and inclusion agenda, all of those things that we have been reinforced during COVID, because in Belfast still, we have some wicked problems and, you know, we're still a segregated city and we need to come up with solutions for our Belfast problems. So they need to be contextualized. We just can't import it. So we're struggling to figure out how we do this as a city. But I do want to stress, I think the social value aspect is quite helpful because it speaks the language of the development community when you are trying to engage them in placemaking. And so that's one of our starting points just right now for us. Yeah.
Richard, you want to add to that? No, Richard, any comment then?
Actually, maybe Richard will come on in a moment. I was actually going to ask Tiago also from a health benefits perspective. I think how helpful has that case been? You alluded to it in your remarks about further thinking about the economics of that. But let me turn it back over to Richard and Leticia first.
I'm not sure Richard here. So Tiago, you want to? And then I still have my question for Leticia.
Yeah, sure. I can add a few notes on that. I think that it's what Kelly just mentioned really resonates to the way I believe we should approach this. I think that highlighting as I mentioned in my presentation, the intangibles, and quantifying what can be quantified, but also acknowledging and highlighting the intangibles, the intangible values that are related to play in cities is really key. And one aspect for us to bear in mind whenever we have these improvements at the urban space are the concerns with who benefits from the value that is being generated. Because oftentimes what we see is that those we're aiming are not necessarily the ones benefiting from the changes. So we should be concerned not only with the health and well-being impacts, but also on the distribution of those impacts across the population, with the particular explicit focus in reducing health inequalities and inequities in our communities.
Thank you, Tiago. I think you're right. And I think after this COVID crisis, we're all more than ever aware of inequities, particularly in health. Leticia, you pointed to the fact that you really had to go it alone, right, in this claiming these area. After the success you've had, do you now get a little bit more support from the city authorities? Is this something that has opened their eyes? I mean, how is your relationship with the city authorities and the local?
That's a good question. Thank you. I guess what I have to say about that is that after being a civil servant, now being in the private sector and collaborating with whoever wants to play with me, basically, I I think you just need to be very aware of who you're talking with. So you have to go into understanding the person behind the title instead of like trying to come to meetings with cliches in your head. So we have had some decision makers being more open to the theme, especially when we explain what Callie was mentioning, which was the qualitative part of the impact of play. And I think what we need to be talking about is that by creating places that embrace play, we are creating life-changing experiences. So we are witnessing, children having their first, I don't know, boyfriend or girlfriend, or parents being playful in ways that they never imagined before, or just like being able to be close to nature. So it is difficult to change the dynamics, especially in Mexico and Latin America, and the relations of the people in power. But I think, to be honest, I think I have an advantage as I now speak the language, but it is also part of our mission at the studio to just kind of like help other organizations to try to navigate those conversations, which might feel intimidating, but sometimes it's because we are not speaking the same language, and I'm not, even though we're speaking Spanish, but like we're not speaking the same terms, or we're not understanding the where we put the value on what we are looking as impact. So I understand, and I feel completely, I agree completely with Jerome in how can we make this as shiny and precious for people to want to put money in, but we also need to make the case for how it is impacting human lives.
Thank you, Leticia. I think you'll get a lot of queries. I see chat and the Q&A are buzzing, asking for.
Francis, can I add something now? Sorry, it's Richard here.
Go ahead, Richard.
I'm very sorry.
Yes, we were looking forward to hear your voice.
Thank you very much for the patience. No, I just wanted to say, just to reinforce what Callie was saying, I mean, I think Callie's working on the front line in terms of city centre regeneration and development, but I think everything that I see points towards creating the context for developers to really take this and move it forward, because we have a strategy in Belfast called the Belfast Agenda, which is focused around bringing families into the city centre and reimagining what Belfast city centre is going to look like. Callie's very much involved in the development of a strategy called the Bolder Vision, which is about how the city centre can be used better for mobility, green space, become a people-focused place. And I just think all of those things are going to create the environment where developers can really get involved. I think that's probably another piece of work for us to really get stuck into over the course of the next 6 months or a year, really to engage with developers and have those kind of conversations. But I think everything is being put in place that will give us the best chance of success in having those conversations.
Lauren, I think this topic is so interesting. We should have everybody back in a year and see how the working groups are evolving and how the initiative is moving forward. Back to you, Lauren.
Absolutely. I think we can commit to that. And I know we're running short on time. I was going to ask each of the speakers if they could, in 30 seconds or less, that's a challenging one, give us your view or your call to action for play as we go forward with this initiative, if you were to articulate your work in the form of a commitment or call to action. So perhaps I can come to you, Jerome, first as a co-leader of this coalition. What would you say about the future as a call to action or a commitment?
I think I would pick up on what Leticia just mentioned there, which is the importance of language. The importance of language, both in terms of, we talked earlier about the importance of speaking the the local language, if you like, literally, you know, speaking Spanish where people speak Spanish and speaking English where people speak English, etc. That's very, very important. But also the importance of language across sectors. The solution to the play deficit is not going to sit in one sector or another. It's going to sit in a partnership between the private and the public. And we need to therefore construct a language and narrative around where value is created within that context. So that my call to action would be through this network. You know, let's do that. Let's develop that language.
So let's create a common language. Leticia?
I would say to think of what you enjoyed the most when you were a child, and now that you're an adult, what can you do to change the environment around you so other children can do that you enjoyed the most? And it can be, you know, jumping in puddles, or like looking at frogs, or looking at the grass, or whatever, but just try to create those moments throughout the urban fabric.
Fantastic. Richard and Callie?
I'll jump in because Leticia, I was just writing this down, and you articulated what I'm thinking. I want to think of play more broadly, and I want to think about it integrated, not just single a space where you go. I want to think about broadly in the city center fabric, and that by doing that, it benefits people of all ages. And that's where I think I want to go in my headspace, in my physical delivery here. Thanks.
Excellent. Tiago?
Perhaps Richard would like to go first.
Thank you, Tiago. Yeah, I thought the challenges for me are really putting young people, hearing the voice of young people and not making assumptions about what they want to do. That's one big one for us. I think there's something about getting local, so like having a sense of what Belfast means by play, you know, or what does the city want from play. And then I thought, how can we be more creative in how we do things, and how can we create environments where people feel they can be creative? Those are my three sort of challenges.
Well, Lauren, in my case, a call to action would be very much around making sure that health is not only an outcome of what we do or don't do with our urban environments for kids to play, for example, but also an input. And we have a role to play as a larger health community. Being you an engineer, an urban planner, an architect, you're also a health professional, because what you do, it really impacts the health of everyone. And another aspect to highlight, echoing what some colleagues did already, is for us to revisit what is the reason why we build cities, why we decided collectively to live together in these urban environments. And if we decide to place health, well-being, happiness, the value of play at the core of that decision, then we definitely need to work towards transforming the built environment for that goal.
Thank you all so much for tonight's presentations and those calls to action. This was so much fun. Francis and I are committed to bringing everybody back to have another session on play as we progress with the coalition. And so I just, again, want to thank everyone who is on the line tonight for making the time. There's been a wonderful dialogue in the chat as well. Please stay connected to this initiative. There are ways to participate both in the survey and by getting in touch with us. So please do connect. And I hope that everyone has a very safe and playful morning, afternoon, or evening, and a healthy one at that. Speaking of health and input, the next session is going to be on resilient food systems. So the input into our bodies, into our lives. So please join us in 2 weeks for that one. But for now, good night from Singapore. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.